Hi there, it's Donovan, and welcome back to another edition of One Last Game, where one doesn't actually even mean one. And today I want to talk about the creators of this stupid fuck-ass mouse who decided to put the charge port at the bottom! With the latest release of OS 26 comes the new Games app, something that's released on all of Apple's devices, which made me wonder, I'm a fuck-ass little bootlicker, and I like video games. Let's merge the two. So, we're talking about Apple and games today and how much of a disappointment it's been, but there's seeds of potential there that we could dive into, and let's just hope Tim Cook's a little busy, working on, trying to get really good games on their platforms instead of making a gold bar exclusive to the president. With the Games app comes a curated experience for games on Apple platforms where you can easily find games, access Apple Arcade, find your friends, go to challenges, whatever. The Games app is a pretty whatever app. This was Apple's big opportunity to do something big for gaming. Well, this Games app is kind of a culmination of a bunch of old ideas that have already been utilized for the past decade and just stuffing it into this brand new app without adding anything actually substantial. This just goes to show how out of touch Apple executives are and Apple developers are with gaming in general, which it's really disappointing because Apple makes some amazing hardware, not just, in terms of the build quality and its super minimalist design, but in terms of the actual hardware and software integration. They provide some powerful tools that help people make creative and great things, and especially the Macs nowadays. The Mac has definitely made a substantial leap forward with Apple Silicon, providing really powerful ARM-based silicon custom made by Apple and putting them and optimize them really well for their own hardware, and the results speak for themselves.
And before Apple Silicon, you probably remember some of their earlier attempts, like the trash can Mac Pro. No doubt they wanted to do something crazy. They wanted to put a workstation class computer on the desk cooled by a single fan. We saw how that went with the Intel chip inside, or even some of those razor thin i9 MacBook Pros that started having overheating issues. But now that Apple Silicon has gotten this good and this efficient over time, they're actually able to make tiny, powerful computers like the Mac Studio and now like this little Mac Mini over here.
There are some downsides with the Apple Silicon though, and that's primarily with gaming, which is what we're talking about today with its integrated graphics. Apple Silicon has its own dedicated GPU. It doesn't have its own graphics card that other PC gaming laptops have. They have RTXs inside or AMD processors that are specifically made for gaming, and that results in a bigger form factor, something that Apple has been dabbling in with a bit, but obviously won't go all the way forward into that. They want to prioritize, form and function and balance the two, which unfortunately makes Apple kind of a laughingstock. Because, well, we can go all the way back to the Pippin, but we don't need to go all the way back there. We can go to even looking today. When you bring up gaming with Apple and specifically on the Mac, people will laugh at you. People will scoff at you. I've felt the brunt of it, and I kind of deserve it. There simply aren't enough video games on the Mac. Yes, there is a pretty large catalog of games to play on Mac, but it pales in comparison to what Windows has. At least we're not Linux. Windows has everything you want from gaming. Game developers develop on Windows, so it's pretty self-explanatory why they would put their games on Windows. On Mac, however, that's a different story. It's kind of a coin toss, really, or maybe not even a coin toss at all. It's really just a hope and pray that your game will come to Mac. And that's resulted in Mac gamers being very left out from the world of PC gaming. And it's weird. It's so weird. I mean, remember that one time when Halo, yes, Halo, was developed exclusively for Mac and was shown off first at a Macworld event with Steve Jobs? What a crazy world that would have been if that stayed true. But that's not the world we live in. And it's so confusing because by revenue standards, Apple is one of, if not the largest gaming company of all time, primarily due to their cuts of revenue from the App Store. Obviously, mobile gaming is a humongous category. It is the largest category by far in gaming, and Apple, they already have a massive foot in the door in gaming. It's just weird that they don't utilize that advantage properly. The App Store is the biggest store for gaming, period, and yet Apple does nothing. Apple has made attempts. For example, they've been bringing more AAA single-player games like Resident Evil Village or No Man's Sky to the Mac and their other platforms, such as even the iPhone and iPad. The fact that you can play Resident Evil 8 on your iPhone is pretty wild, and the ports themselves are really impressive. Shadow of the Tomb Raider works really well. Cyberpunk 2077 actually works surprisingly well on the Mac. It honestly should be no surprise. Apple makes great hardware. At one point, my iPhone 13, yes, was more powerful than a Nintendo Switch. My mobile device was more powerful than a dedicated gaming platform, the dominant gaming platform, mind you. So, Apple and their hardware are no slouches, and when developers put their minds to it, they can produce some great results. You can also play games from iPhone and iPad on your Mac. It just works natively. That's really nice. The problem is, there's a lot of games that just straight up won't do that. So if you ever hit your head really hard and wanted to play Minecraft Bedrock with some other friends that are also playing on other platforms, I can't do that because Minecraft for Windows is, guess what? I don't even know, I can't even finish that sentence. But Minecraft Bedrock is on iOS, and you can't play iOS games on here. Microsoft excluded that from the Mac, so you can't utilize that. There are ways you can circumvent this by using the iPhone mirroring app and connecting a controller to your iPhone. Therefore, you can have incredible latency, and there's some other games that, won't work on a on a point-and-click device like a Mac. Remember the time when Shigeru Miyamoto himself was at an Apple event for the iPhone 7 announcing Super Mario Run? That's Apple trying to get their foot in the door, or at least maybe Nintendo trying to, get the foot in the door with their shitty $10 mobile game.
Haha, you thought you can get rid of me in the last video, but Editor Don here to remind people that Donovan always forgets something to talk about. More specifically, the new game overlay feature in macOS 26, which allows you to access important controls fast and invite the two people that also play on Mac to play with you. You sad little soul. Hey, what up? It's DonovanDud here, and we forgot to mention Apple's dedicated GPU accelerated technology known as Metal, which is used by basically every single software that uses graphics technologies like video games. And Metal 4 brings to the table brand new additions like just overall better performance, but also Metal FX and ray tracing, which basically means improved upscaling, higher frame rates, better ray tracing, no duh. But then there's also machine learning capabilities, which has new tensors that are now a native resource to Apple Silicon, and also it's kind of Apple's own version of NVIDIA's DLSS. It's basically using AI to make up those in-between frames so you can get even more frames and lessen the load on the GPU. And finally, with Metal 4 comes better cross compatibility, so if you're developing on Windows with DirectX 11, transitioning over to Metal 4 should be a whole lot easier. It's nice to see Apple playing a little bit nicer. A little is the key word.
Apple Arcade was probably their biggest push into gaming, offering a honestly pretty decent service for mobile games. You can get a bunch of mobile games without ads through Apple Arcade. And since Apple Arcade is included with the Apple One bundle, I own Apple Arcade even without outright buying it. I actually never wanted Apple Arcade. It's just included into my Apple subscriptions that are also with Apple TV Plus, iCloud Plus, and Apple Music. So I just have Arcade now, so I'm like, whatever, I guess it's nice to have. I don't get to see a bunch of mobile game ads shoved in my face whenever I just want to play Tomb of the Mask. But Apple's attempts are still futile. Game porting is still a little bit clunky. The App Store is still not the friendliest place for developers and for consumers either for purchasing video games, and there's just still isn't enough developers willing to move on to the Mac or port their games to the Mac. So I want to propose how Apple could possibly fix this. It is a difficult road, it is a long road, but it's Apple, one of the richest companies in the world. We gotta cut Tim Cook some slack. He's a busy guy apparently. So number one, they gotta be more friendly with Steam. Other game developers have tried this. EA, Activision, they've all tried making their own game stores, but they always just keep on crawling back to Steam. Steam is the number one place for PC gaming, and they just gotta accept that. And unfortunately, as of now, Apple doesn't really play nice with Steam. Apple really prioritizes their own store, the App Store, and now an extension, the Games app. Apple will fight tooth and nail, as we saw with the Epic Games lawsuit, to have their great old cut of revenue from these stores. Steam just doesn't really optimize their app very well for the Mac, and that's partially Steam's fault, but also Apple's fault. Again, there is another point of Apple being anti-consumer and taking off one of Steam's apps from the App Store purely because it doesn't meet their qualifications. Yeah, I got rejected from an Apple store, but meanwhile they hire people at the Genius Bar who probably got hit on the head as a baby with a bar. But Apple needs to cooperate with Steam more. They need to have more cross-compatible games where you buy one game on Steam and it happens to appear on the App Store list as well. You don't need to buy both games at the same. You don't need to buy both versions of the game. Have cross-compatibility to make things easier. If you buy something on your Windows PC, have it appear on your iPhone, your iPad, and your Mac. Apple needs to ease up on their policies so Steam can feel more comfortable developing for Apple platforms instead of developing for Apple platforms like it's an afterthought. Number two, Apple needs to have better porting tools. Right now for Windows, it's pretty simple. Develop on Windows, then they make the game for Windows. Or other systems, they already got their tools ready and it's just a simple click away. For Apple, it's a little bit of a different story. Firstly, they have different architecture. They use ARM CPUs instead of x86 CPUs, so there's a little bit of a layer of translation, and also game porting itself for the Mac is a little bit difficult. It needs to be more simple where it's just one click and it's already translating to ARM architecture and Apple devices instead of a 6-month task like a Nintendo Switch 2 game. It needs to be more streamlined so that way developers can easily just add their games to Apple devices with just a simple click. And Apple's trying right now. They have the game porting toolkit right now, but that's more of a little proof of concept. It's still very clunky and doesn't work the best. Apple just needs to spruce up that toolkit and just make it a better service and a more legitimate service for developers to use. Number three is Apple Arcade. Apple Arcade provides a pretty decent service for mobile games without game ads. That's great and all, but if you want to be more competitive to the core gamer, the PC gamers out there, they need to push more quality games, not mobile games, but like real big boy games that you wouldn't dare catch me playing at a preschool. Honestly, Apple can go the Game Pass route and provide those AAA games that they've been touting for all these years that have been porting to the Mac. They can tout those as premium deals on Apple Arcade where you get to play them for free as long as you subscribe. It's their version of Game Pass, and on top of AAA quality games and mobile games, that's already a really good deal at that point. A premium app, maybe a premium tier of Apple Arcade. There you go, that's an even infinitely better service. It'll just push the fact that one, gamers love deals, and two, Apple's taking gaming very seriously by adding these quality AAA games to their platform. Apple also needs a better Game Center. Game Center already has their achievements, it already has friends, but it's a little bit lackluster. A Game Center has always been seen as, an afterthought. I always forget, many gamers forget that Game Center is even a thing. There are so many people in my classes that own an iPhone, that play iPhone games, Clash Royale, Subway Surfers, you name it. but I haven't seen a single soul utilize Game Center. I tried friending my friend on Game Center one time, and they were so surprised that Game Center even existed. That's a problem. Apple needs to make Game Center more of a forefront on Apple Arcade or any game in general. They need to integrate that even more into the Games app and make it even more social. They just need to advertise the heck out of Game Center even more. They should force these AAA game developers to add Game Center to their games and integrate many features of it into Game Center. They need to make Game Center more important because right now it is not even thought of for the majority of gamers on iPhone. If you look at Apple TV Plus, it started off as a fledgling little streaming service that had a small amount, but a small quality amount of TV shows. Look at it today. It is one of the best valued streaming services out there with very quality titles that Apple has invested a ton in. They've invested in the production of many shows and movies at this point. They need to make that same treatment available for Apple Arcade. Apple needs to treat gaming more as a central cultural app instead of just another app that they need to have because they're obligated to. They need to treat it just like how they treat Apple TV and even Apple Music. They need to invest big into their games. They need to, push for games. They have all the money in the world. They can even produce their own video games. They already bought the developer of Sneaky Sasquatch, which is a super, super interesting move. Is this the start of Apple exclusives or Apple produced video games? We'll have to wait and see, but right now Apple does not take gaming seriously. They don't put any effort into it, primarily because they don't put any money into it. They don't put any exclusives into it, which goes into my next point, possibly exclusives. People might be pissed off at Apple making their own exclusives, but let's be real, exclusives sell hardware and exclusives make great deals. That's why people flock to Apple TV Plus, Netflix, or people flock to maybe Xbox Game Pass, PlayStation Plus, Nintendo Switch. They need these exclusives or at least great deals because Apple and deals are kind of non-existent. They're kind of similar to those idiots over in Japan, honestly. But probably the more realistic option is that since they've been courting some of these AAA developers to show up at their events, but they're mostly single-player games. They're one-and-dones. They're great talking points for like 6 months, but then, they fall out of cultural relevance because it's simply a single-player game. That's just how it goes sometimes. Apple needs to invest more, honestly, in live service games. Games that make people come back over and over and over again. They need more of those games because those are the games that are quite lacking on Mac. Fortnite is still banned on the Mac. Team Fortress 2 was deleted off of the Mac simply because Apple no longer supports 32-bit apps, which is a little bit of a double-edged sword. CSGO isn't on the Mac. Apex Legends, Valorant, League of Legends, Marvel Rivals, the list can go on and on. Apple does have single-player games, Rise of the Tomb Raider, Cyberpunk, Minecraft Java, Resident Evil 4 and 8, the Civilization games, the list can go on and on. They have some games, but they are quite lacking in the multiplayer aspect. These are the biggest games on PC by far. Some of these games only work on PC because of how their controls are laid out, how extensive and expansive their gameplays are, that they wouldn't be able to fit on something like a console. They need that keyboard and mouse gameplay. And the Mac, it has all of those requirements, but it simply doesn't have it. They need to push for more live service games on their platforms. They need to court those developers more so than the quality AAA games. Yes, as quality as they are, they need more live service games because those are the games that PC gamers really play. Those are the games that are kind of sometimes really built for machines like the Mac, for PC and laptops. So those games are sorely needed. And then honestly, last but not least, is kind of their hardware. Apple does make some incredible hardware, but sometimes they can be extremely stingy on how they want you to use it. For example, the brand new Apple Vision Pro, they forego the use of controllers, which is an amazing innovation. You being able to control a device purely by your eyes and the tap of your finger is monumental, but your hands are simply not good enough controllers for games, and games are a laughingstock on the Apple Vision Pro, primarily because Apple doesn't see the Apple Vision Pro as a VR headset, but it very much could be. It offers virtual reality settings and applications. It could very much be a brand new category for Apple to dive into, VR gaming. They can push for VR games onto the Apple Vision Pro and the more apps, the merrier. And they simply are lacking so far behind in the games department for Apple Vision Pro. They have, stupid little mobile games that you can play in a VR setting, and then you can have, sort of novel ideas, maybe a tower defense game I've seen, or ping pong you can play. You do now have the option to use the PlayStation VR 2 Sense controllers with the Apple Vision Pro, but there are very, very few games that utilize it. There just needs to be, again, a harder push. Apple has all the money in the world. They need to push for more VR experiences using these PSVR 2 controllers. Or, heck, Apple, just build your own controllers maybe. This may be for the only 2 people that use an Apple Vision Pro, but it's nice to have more apps, is it not, Apple? Wouldn't you want new people that are adopting your Vision products to already have an expansive library of apps? And then you have the Apple TV. Apple TV is never seen as a gaming device, but it kind of is its own little mini console. It uses a pretty decently powered chip and can offer some console quality games. Anyone remember Minecraft Apple TV edition? That's like reminding someone, hey, anyone remember ARMS? But there simply isn't enough games that warrant being played on an Apple TV. There are some games, like Apple already has a pretty decent catalog of games that could work on the Apple TV. Keyword is could, because a lot of games simply forego support for the Apple TV. And though, again, who the hell is gaming on an Apple TV except for your lobotomized neighbor? But it's nice to have the option, right? As for games on iPhone, iPad, and Mac, it's just a shame that some of these games honestly do not sell very well on the App Store. Primarily because, one, the advertising is sorely lacking. Number two, not many people will be playing these AAA games on an iPhone or an iPad. But the key phrase is that it's nice to have the option. I've played Resident Evil 8 on my iPad. It works pretty surprisingly well. It's just, I'd rather play these types of games on my Nintendo Switch 2. But if you don't own a Nintendo Switch 2, it would be nice to play them on your iPhone. And the fact that they are on iPhone kind of gives Apple some gaming cred. And as for the Mac, and I guess this also applies to iPhone and iPad, they already have a dedicated game mode which increases performance. And so Apple does kind of think of gaming sometimes. We wish it was a little bit more. But to summarize all of this up, if Apple actually used their loads amount of money, and if they actually took gaming seriously, Apple platforms could be a great home for video games. I don't game on the Mac. I sometimes game on the Mac, primarily for games that would work better in a computer environment like Don't Starve Together or Minecraft Java, but most of the time I'm playing games on my Nintendo Switch 2 and my PlayStation 5, primarily because, one, I just prefer console gaming. I don't want to be stuck here at the very same desk I do homework and pay taxes. I don't want to be cramped here all day in my office chair, slaving away on a computer. I want to be on my couch like a stupid little couch potato and playing a video game with a controller, or playing co-op with friends. I can't do that on a desktop. But number two, come on, man. I like the option to game on a Mac. I like thinking about gaming on a Mac without having to jump through so many hoops. If I wanted to play Lethal Company I have to download Parallels and emulate Windows through a virtual machine in order to play Windows exclusive games on my Mac. These games will work, but developers have to actually put an effort in, and more importantly, Apple needs to put an effort in. I want to one day live in a world, a pretty fucked up world, but a world nonetheless, where for some reason my friends want to play with me a game of Fortnite and they add, Samus's delicious booty cheeks to the game. I want to be able to play that on my desktop, on my Mac. And unfortunately today, that's not the case. But it can be one day if Apple and developers actually tried. We are now heading on over to the comment corner where, in my video about amiibos, Neo Knight Draws suggests that Nintendo would one day hopefully make a free-to-play crossover RPG where you use amiibos to unlock your characters. Honestly, not a bad idea. That would be the most expensive game in the world, so, the big greedy end would love that idea. Oh wait, hold on. I'm getting Amiibo Festival flashbacks. No, never mind. Stop cooking, you're burning the kitchen. That's it from One Last Game, but there is always one last game. And now, if you'll excuse me... This turns me on.